Peace and blessings, my brother. Salute to everybody here, and just thank God for all the great work that everybody does, even the brothers and sisters that never been incarcerated. We appreciate the work that you do, and just happy to be here with you.
Absolutely. I'm going to pass it off to you, my brother Fred. How you doing, Fred? You know, I got to pay my respects to those that came before me. Thank you for holding that door open, man. Thank you.
Peace and blessings to everybody. Glad to be aboard for some of the issues that's very important that we're going to discuss today, among many other issues that's happening in our state of Connecticut here. Glad to be amongst the many. All right, good morning, everyone. Glad everyone could join us for one of many issues regarding our state and criminal justice reform. However, today we want to talk about the discussion of the cost of incarceration and the collateral damage, as well as the impact it has on individuals coming home who get some sort of inheritance or some type of lawsuit. The cost of incarceration recently has caught the eye of the Supreme Court, where they had a 9-0 decision where they said financial penalties levied against states may be a violation of the federal 8th Amendment and the Constitution of protection against excessive fines. One thing Connecticut has done over the years, we were 7th in the country as far as incarceration and locking people up. Since then, the population from 21,000 has went down to maybe 9 or 12,000. And we have done some good things as far as reform is concerned. But the cost of incarceration is one issue that we need to really take a look at, and the penalties and the damages that's done to people and their families. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague from Fannie Rinchie, Diane McKnight.
Peace and blessings to all. Thank you, Brother Fred. And before we introduce our esteemed panel members, I appreciate all of their support and contribution to this subject. And for those of you who don't know, it's General Statutes, Connecticut General Statutes 1885B from A, subsection from A to C. And what I would like to do is just to take 3 minutes apiece. I would like for our panel members to introduce themselves and just tell a little bit about themselves and how they are connected to this issue. And then we're going to go on into question and answers after each one of them takes the 3 minutes apiece to introduce themselves. Let me begin with our first panelist, Mr. Representative Nolan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir.
How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's doing good. My name is Anthony Nolan. I'm a representative out of New London, Connecticut. Little transparency, I'm also a police officer in New London, Connecticut. And I'm a different kind of officer. I actually call myself a peace officer because I like to treat people like I want to be treated. So the only way for me to do that is to act peacefully in any situations that I have, no matter what the ordeal. I believe it was about a year ago when I met some of y'all up at the Capitol, and we had some hard discussion in regards to the cost of incarceration and how we can deal with trying to make some changes. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, we weren't able to meet up and have discussion like we wanted to. Then it became real busy just because of the things we had to do in regards to COVID. So I did submit a bill, proposed bill 6338 in regards to the liens and proceeds that they try and take from those who were incarcerated. And I'm trying to expedite removing some of those barriers where I'm asking to change the legislation from 50% of proceeds to 25%, and also to change the time period in which these provisions can be taken from an individual to 7 years instead of 20 years. And the reason I chose 7 years is because in discussion with some of my friends that have been incarcerated and some of my community members, the 7-year mark is around the mark that people try and get reprieved from all the things that they did prior to being incarcerated. So we thought that was a good time to do this. So if you have not talked to any of your legislators and or sent letters in regards to this bill, please do, because we want to get it on the agenda and we want to get a hearing for it. Without your support, it's going to be a little challenging. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Representative Nolan. We appreciate that and look forward with working with you in the future on presenting these bills before the legislature. At this time, we would like to introduce to you Professor Anna Van Cleave from Yale University. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and say how you're connected to this issue?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for putting on this panel, and thank you so much for including me in this conversation. It's really great to be talking about these issues. So I am Anna Van Cleave. I'm the director of the Lyman Center at Yale Law School, and we're connected to these issues because we've been researching and teaching issues of access to justice for some time. And we have, for the past few years, started to focus on the costs of criminal system involvement overall. And then more recently have started to look more specifically at what we call pay to stay provisions, the cost of actual incarceration. We work with a network of fellows across the country who are litigating and trying to change policies on these issues. And also more recently, a lot of our work has focused on the intersection of questions of public finance. So why are governments actually relying on these streams of revenue, and how did this come to be, and what are the historical reasons behind it? And then what are the impacts, and bringing conversations about public finance together with people who are out in the field and on the ground fighting for abolition.
Anna, thank you. And Anna has been working closely with us, as well as Professor Sarah Russell, on these issues, on trying to push this agenda. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to introduce a young lady who was actually impacted by this law. And we just would like for Ayishea Denson to just say who she is and how she's connected to this issue. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ayishea Denson, and I have been impacted by this issue actually a couple of years ago. And if I can describe how I felt, I think my initial reaction was embarrassment, because I had my attorney. I've been home 10 years now, but I've dealt with the same attorney with my car accident. So this time when he called, the first thing he said was, "Ayishea, you are incarcerated?" So my reaction, like my heart got tight. I got all, I'm like, why is he asking me this in my head? Because I'm like, this is supposed to be gone. So I tell him, yes, I was incarcerated. Why would you ask me something like that? He said, because I have never in all my years of practice seen, he said, they sent a letter saying you owe $139,000. He said, I've never seen this number to owe to the state. I said, are you kidding me? So they're gonna take my money? He said, yeah. I said, you have to give it to him? He said, Ayishea, I have to. I feel like I've been partying. This just, everything comes up. I'm partying, but I'm not. Everything, my past is always coming up in some way, shape, or form.
Say that again, sister. You said you were pardoned?
I am pardoned.
And you still had to pay money? Yes. Okay. And we're going to get more into the questions and answers, but thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And Ayishea, could you tell everybody what you do now, if you would like?
I'm a social worker for DCF.
Give that sister a salute. Definitely. Thank you, sister. And at this time, we want to introduce another person who was personally impacted by this law. And as we get further into the question, later on into the question, he's going to have some very surprising details for you. But we just like for Mr. Ruffin just to introduce himself and just briefly say how he was connected to this issue.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Ruffin. I was incarcerated for 24 plus years. During my incarceration, my mother passed away, and she worked hard. She had insurance. She paid for her insurance, and she wanted to leave something to her boys so that they may be able to put their lives back together. So after, serving all the time that I've served, DOC came after me. They initially tried to sue me for like 190,000 or something because I had a 40-year sentence. So here I am, no mother. My father's gone. My stepfather's passed away. I lost uncles. And I have to put my life back together. And DOC came after the money that my mother worked hard for to pay for her life insurance. And they went after this money, and it became very, very passionate for me. And there's some things that I would love to bring to this table that you guys need to know about this. And I think I should yield my time for now, and we come back because I got some things to bring out. Because
and we want to hear him too, brother.
Yes, sir, brother.
we want your expertise on this topic.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, brother. We appreciate you. And before I introduce Sarah Russell, just a sidebar note. I want everyone on the call who may not be familiar with this, as Fred gave you a summary of the law. Remember now, it's not after you get convicted. It's 20 years after you've been released. That brother just told you he did 24 years and he got out, and he could have this happen to him up to 20 years after he's released. This is criminal. As we go on, we're going to ask Professor Sarah Russell, who's been on the front line for a lot of issues of pushing legislation, changing laws in the state of Connecticut. She's worked with us closely with Van Cleave. Sarah, could you please introduce yourself to everybody and how you're connected to this issue?
Sure, thank you. And thanks so much for holding this panel and bringing this issue out for discussion. My name's Sarah Russell. I teach at Quinnipiac University School of Law, and I run a legal clinic there. Our work focuses on issues of sentencing, prison conditions, prisoner reentry issues, and also issues involving long sentences imposed on children, among other issues. I also have an opportunity to teach a class to students on these topics as well. But in the legal clinic, students work directly on cases involving clients. And so we've worked with a number of coming out of prison who are facing barriers of all different kinds to reentry, whether it's in housing, employment, licenses, and more. And we also represent people who have had their rights violated while they're in prison and are seeking, they're filing lawsuits related to that, either while they're still in prison or after they've been released. And so we've seen in the context of doing that civil rights litigation, this issue of this lien come up a lot, and it impacts the recovery that we're able to get for our clients in case, and plays a major role in sort of people's ability to enforce their rights when they've been violated by prison officials and other state actors. So this is an issue that's been out there for a while, and I'm so grateful that it's getting the attention it needs, and hopefully an ability to bring some change in this area.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you very much. We appreciate you and all the work that you've been doing. And then our last panelist, he had to be at trial, but his name is attorney Darnell Cross out of Stamford, Connecticut. And he's a great trial attorney. And me and him had a very long discussion about a particular issue related to this topic. And I said, brother, you're the trial attorney, not me. I want you to frame that issue for us. He said he would do it, even though he had to be on a trial for in the state of New York. So video with him, we'll have a video with him that we'll see later. Say again, Darryl.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
This is how live Zooms work, right? So the DJ had a similar experience to this panel, and I've said, you know, he wanted to share a piece of what happened to him. So I don't know if you guys want to incorporate that, because I don't think enough people realize that this happens, right? This happens every single day. And then we're talking about, I mean, you guys are the experts, but you understand about how wealth is created and these people leave houses and money for people. And that's how generational wealth starts. Well, if this system is interrupting that, and you guys are going to expound on that. But I just wanted to give you that. And I think that, you know, we'd let him say a few things about in reference to what happened to him as well.
Absolutely. The DJ, if the brother just want to take 3 minutes to introduce himself and say how he's connected.
All right.
And then we'll come back with the question that we give to Ayishea, and Brother John will also direct that question to you as well.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm honored to be here. I took the day off of work to do this, but I didn't know this topic was going to come up. I was incarcerated for 18 months. I got out 2003. And I think a month and a half, as you see, I DJ, but I started by doing pictures. I'm a photographer. I took pictures in Bridgeport at the arena. Nelly, Fat Joe, and different rappers were performing. And Nelly's bodyguard was pointing at me. I had permission from the arena staff and the people that promoted it. I had permission to be there. I'm in the front row taking pictures. His security guard came, and to make a long story short, he pushed me down and assaulted me and tried to take my camera. So I got a lawsuit, and it went through quick. I used the same lawyer of the person that sued 50 Cent for his bodyguard doing the same type of thing. And in like 27 days, I had won about maybe $17,000. It went through real quick. I'm coming out of jail, $17,000 we know can do something for you. You know, because I didn't have no job. And then it went through so quick. I was happy. They told me I was going to receive 17,000. I never had 17,000. And right before the day I was supposed to come sign, my lawyer told me that there was a lien against it. They said I owed the state of Connecticut $88,000. I was in for 18 months. I work at the VA hospital now for the US government with my felony that's trying to get pardoned. I'm trying to get a pardon as we speak. But anyway, my first 2 years there, I didn't even make 88,000 and I lived. So how did it cost 88,000 to live in there for 18 months?
Interesting question.
And they took 16,000. Somehow the lawyer finagled it and I got about 1,600. And one more thing, because I know I wasn't scheduled to be on here. One more thing is I fell behind on my child support while I was there because I didn't know that they can reduce it till you get out. So it was just building up. Child support was coming after me to lock me up when I got home 30 days later. And I told them, please don't lock me up. I got a lawsuit coming. When the lawsuit came, the state of Connecticut took the money for DOC and didn't give 1 penny to the state of Connecticut for my child support. And then I had to go back to child support court and they were like, you didn't give us any money. But they're the ones that took it, the same state. And so with that being said, I didn't know this was even gonna be an issue that was coming up, but that's kind of my story. And I don't think it's right. I don't even think they should get any of the money, if you ask me. Yes, because sir. I seen on documentary, a jail meal only costs less than $2. So 3 meals a day,
good point.
3 meals a day, the lights go off at a certain time. So the light bill ain't crazy. The lights go off at a certain time. At my house, I can keep the lights on all night if I want. And so, like I said, I'm gonna get off because I could go on and on. And but
I appreciate you though.
This happens. This is happening. It's still happening. And by the way, I'm One Stop Entertainment. My name is Vaughn Live. My
Yes,
business
sir.
card information is up there. If anybody ever wants to get at me, all you got to do is go through Daryl. You can get to me. And I like doing something for a cause. I'm
Yes,
supposed to be
sir.
at work right now. He told me the 23rd and 24th. I'm thinking he's talking about March.
Yo,
I
all
put in for
right,
the
man.
time.
Come on, man. You ain't gotta tell him all that, man. Let's keep
I
going,
took
man.
off to be here.
Well,
Shut
listen,
that
Hey,
guy
he's an
down.
entertainer, man. Don't
well,
forget.
listen, brother. We
All
appreciate
right.
you,
Hey,
Thank you.
Naeem,
man, and your contribution to this. And it's only gonna cost you one thing. You the DJ. You're gonna have to pay. You're gonna have to play "Get Involved" by James Brown for me later.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I got you.
"Get Involved" by
brother,
James Brown.
brother
Yeah,
Naeem,
You
can
know,
I
hey,
clear up
hold
something
up.
that he
As you
brought up?
as you can see, this cause of incarceration has impacted a lot of people throughout the city of the state of Connecticut, mainly Black and brown people. So really, it's starting to be a racial issue. Even though we say that it's not, we can actually say that. You know what I'm saying? And what happens is it's intergenerational and it's entrapment. It's entrapment and it's punishment. That seems that after the crime we committed, we stay incarcerated or we stay in punishment forever, man. So this thing is dead serious. You know, this ain't, and I'm not saying anybody's taking it lightly, but me, myself and Dai been on pushing this bill for a lot of years up in the legislature, and a lot of people never heard of it or they didn't even believe it. So as we have about 145 people on there, this is just the beginning and scratching the surface. And we're looking
Absolutely.
to continue this after this. I just wanted to say that as we move forward.
Yes, sir. And in saying that, brother, I know we kind of short on time. I'm going to move right into the questions because Representative Nolan has to be somewhere else as well, and so does Professor Anna Van Cleave. So I want to go to begin the first series of direct questions. And the first question is for Representative Nolan. What are your thoughts on why this law should be changed? And tell us a little bit more about your initiative to propose a bill to repeal or modify this law.
Well, you know, obviously, I think everybody just expressed the reasons, you know, why this law needs to be changed. And it's because it keeps those who were once incarcerated after they get out of incarceration. And it's just a trap. It's a setup, I believe. And I don't know, it might sound funny coming from me as a legislator and a police officer, but it's a trap. It's entrapment for those that are exiting incarceration to keep them in check and to keep the chains on them to limit their abilities to be successful and excel with any kind of income or any kind of things that were left to them. You know, I have a pretty good relationship with members of my community as a peace officer. And I think Daryl will vouch for me on it. They come to me before some of them get incarcerated, and they come to me after some of them are incarcerated. And I have some deep discussions with them on ways how to deal with police, if the police dealt with them unfairly, and explain what they need to do to take care of it. And also to try and assist them in the things that they need either before or after, especially with the connection with Daryl, because Daryl has so many outlets that are good in our community. So after all that, and then hearing from a few brothers, when I first became a legislator in 2019, it had been a simmering topic in my heart. And I always said that if I could do anything about it, that I would come and do something about it. And I'm more action than words, and it's what it is. I really press on everybody that's listening. Connect with 5 people and explain what's going on and explain how deep with this is, because it's the people that are going to help make this change. You know, the legislators are going to listen, but they're going to only listen when we have enough people to come out and say, look, this is ridiculous and we need to change. And we need to change it because it creates more inequity and more inequality, and it keeps you chained up after incarceration. So I got mad love for y'all. Please keep
brother,
in
thank
touch. And if you see me step out, it's because I got a couple more meetings going on, but I'm gonna hold on as far as I can. Thank you.
I'm just gonna say real quick, he is the real deal. I mean, you know, when we ask, he shows up. And I want to thank you personally in front of, like, you know, a lot of times we thank people privately, but we must all, you know, when we can, thank people in public. And I just want to thank you for who you are. I'm out.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Nolan. We really appreciate your contribution to this issue. And me and Fred remember the day that we approached you because we had been working on it for so many years. And then we heard that you came up with a bill. We was like, brother just came up with a bill. And that's why it's important, like he said, to have the conversation, because that way it's not 8 different people submitting a bill. They can unify, join on to one bill, and we'll probably get more done like that. So Representative Nolan, I really appreciate your efforts on this matter. Thank you, brother.
And if I could share real quick.
Absolutely.
Why I didn't totally cut all the funding from it is because that's gonna be their catch-22. That's what's going to say, well, where are we going to find the funding that we use to make up for everything else? So I figured if we do a little now, then not too far distant, we can go and chop the rest of it. So that's why I only did 25%. It's not really only 25%, that's a lot. And also taking it down from 20 years to 7 years. Which is another big step, and it just needs y'all support. That's all I'm looking for.
Absolutely, thank you once again. We appreciate you. And at this point in time, we do have a comment from Mr. Ruffin. But what I want to do, because Professor Anna Van Cleave has another commitment as well, I just want to get to her question. And then, Brother John, we're going to bring the question right to you so you can do your thing, brother. You can inform us and whatever you need to, information you need to give us, man. We need that and we're looking forward to it. Brother Fred, you have a question for Professor Anna Van Cleave?
Sir, Anna, I have a question for you. On the national level, what has your research revealed about this law in other states, and why do you feel that this law should be repealed or modified?
That's a great question. Thank you for that question. Thank you also again for including us in this conversation, because I think it's one that is too long in coming. And to sort of understand where the issue is nationally now, I think it's helpful to talk about it and situate it against sort of the broader issue of costs of criminal system involvement overall. Because it gives some sort of indication about where all of this is going and where these pay to stay provisions nationally might be going next. And so to back up just a little bit, a lot of this conversation really started getting rolling with the protests in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014 that were highlighting a lot of the abuses in that system, not with these particular costs of incarceration issues, although those are present in the St. Louis and surrounding areas in the jails, but really about fines and fees overall and the way that they were being used to fund government systems and all of the perverse incentives that created for every actor in the criminal system, and the outrage of the community in response. So that started bringing everything to the national level of conversation in 2014. But it's taken a long time to get moving. And so a lot of the research over time, there's been sort of this proliferation of research on the sociological impacts of all of these costs, fines, fees, all the way from the point of arrest, all the way through release and probation and parole, and the way that they stack up, and the impacts that that has on communities and families who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. There's been a lot of really fabulous work that's been done, and it's growing, and it's a big part of why we're having all of these conversations today by a researcher at the University of Washington, Alexis Harris, and she's been leading a huge team of researchers that are talking about multiple issues about costs of criminal system involvement. There are multiple places all over the country looking at different jurisdictions and the different ways that these costs are imposed. And that research has been building and making an ever more forceful case that all of these costs of incarceration, imposing them on people who are coming through the criminal system, are incredibly damaging, that they exacerbate income inequality and they exacerbate racial and ethnic inequalities. So given that all of this has sort of been gaining momentum since 2014 or thereabouts, it's a little bit unexpected that these particular issues about costs of incarceration alone are much less examined. So there's been a lot less research on how these provisions are operating nationally than other sorts of criminal system costs. But that is changing. And so that's why it's kind of exciting to talk about it right now. So there are two areas in which this work is taking shape. So when we talk about these, what some use as shorthand pay to stay provisions, there's one category of costs that really captures sort of those incremental costs that are imposed along the way and paid along the way by people who are incarcerated. And so I'm sure everybody is familiar with how those costs stack up. And that's like the cost of phone calls, the cost of J-Pay tablets, the cost of, in some jurisdictions, it's the cost of toilet paper and deodorant. In one jurisdiction that I know of, it's the cost of water. And so all of these costs are being imposed individually on people, and they stack up over time such that when people are leaving prisons and jails, they are leaving, number one, without that financial cushion that they might otherwise have, but also, I think more perversely, often with a mountain of debt that has accumulated. Then the other category of costs that are being imposed are the kinds of ones that we're talking about here, which are the per diem costs that are assessed, some number is attached to how much it costs to spend a day in prison. And those numbers are stacked such that the person who's leaving a prison is then faced with all of this debt about the days and the costs of that have accumulated on these daily costs. So these two types of costs and the way that they're imposed, so they're different in terms of how they come about and who's deciding to impose them, but they're the same in terms of the impacts that they're having on people and how devastating they can be financially. In 2015, there was an important report that came out from the Brennan Center at NYU. And this was, I think, probably the first or the only one that I know of that looks really comprehensively at what's going on across the country with these per diem costs. And, what their research showed is that these costs are not new. So the first pay to stay cost came about in 1846 in Michigan. But the way that these are framed as the daily per diem cost, that is a sort of newer development that really started to take shape in the 1990s, was when a lot of jurisdictions started passing these. And when they were passed, some people sort of attribute the origin of, these laws where I think, one was passed and then other states said, look at what's happening. That's another way of recouping some of our costs or padding our own budget. Some people attribute it to a single article that came out in the Chicago Tribune, which was an op-ed by a law clerk who basically said, I know it might seem laughable, but maybe it's a good idea to start charging rent for people who are incarcerated. And laughable as that may have seemed, jurisdictions started to take that up as a thing that they thought not only that they could do, but also was the right thing to do. And so the justifications around all of that were about imposing some sense of financial accountability and making it sort of the responsibility of the person who's incarcerated. So that started in the 90s, and then by 2015, at least 43 states were authorizing these room and board fees. And so, as I said before, the emerging focus on fines and fees, a lot of work has been done to document the harms, and there are a lot of theories about how the policy should be developed going forward. But what we can say, I think, across the board is where we are now versus where we were in the 1990s is that there is a much greater recognition of the barrier to reentry that these incarceration costs are creating. So the tide is shifting. And so part of this team of researchers that I mentioned, this is part of the shift, is that a few of them, and I can't take credit for the research, this is their research. And so a huge shout out to Gabrielle Kirk and April Fernandez and Brittany Friedman, who are leading the way in expanding national work that's being done on pay to stay provisions. And they are looking at the harmfulness of these laws, they're looking at the immorality of these laws, and they're taking deep dives into jurisdictions. So they've started with Michigan and Illinois to look at where these laws came from, what was the rhetoric that produced them, what were the arguments in favor of them, and where could this issue be going next? And what they have discovered is that a lot of these things came up during times of fiscal austerity. So it's times when budgets were crunched by states and localities. And so it suddenly became very, very useful to be able to talk about financial accountability as though that's what was really going on, when the more immediate fix and the more immediate attraction was that these were helping states with their budget crunches. So one reason for the budget crunch and one reason for the rise of these costs was that throughout the 90s, as everybody I think is well aware, is that there was an explosion in mass incarceration. So costs of incarceration are going up and states are looking for ways to pay. One of the articles that they produced looks really closely at the Illinois system. And I think that's really helpful to talk about here because that was a pay to stay provision that came about in the 1980s, also during a time when they were talking about their budget crunch. In the work that was being done around the Illinois provision, there also was a greater recognition of the harms that were being imposed and personal stories were coming out. So in 2015, the Chicago Tribune ran an article about the damage that this law was doing, featured a man who had received a $31,000 settlement over the death of his mother. And he was sued by the Department of Corrections for $20,000 to cover his own incarceration. He struggled the rest of his life financially, and he died in abject poverty. So the article talks about the impact of the law on people like this, on the settlements over legitimate lawsuits against the state for grievous harms. There was an op-ed calling for the end of these practices, and then the state simply stopped doing it. For a variety of reasons, I think, but they simply stopped doing it. And that's when the legislative debates started to take on more force. And during the legislative debates, there was a real appeal to what a moral failing this law represents. And that was a major factor in the repeal of this law in 2019. So that was a successful example of repeal. So I'm happy to say more. I don't want to take up more of people's times, but there is a lot going on. It's sort of an exciting time to be talking about this, an exciting time to be looking at what other states are doing, because I think Connecticut could take note.
Excellent. Anna, thank you. And this is, and I know the information you gave is from a research perspective. And to some people, you know, maybe that's not exciting. But this conversation is very important, like Fred had already, and I'm just reiterating that. And the information that she gave is crucial and very relevant to what we're talking about if we want to repeal laws like this or take some kind of legal action, because I believe it was Representative Porter, she said, no one should have a life sentence. You know, just going to prison shouldn't be a life sentence. And that's what's happening. These reoccurring collateral damages of your incarceration continue to occur throughout your life. So at this point, I just want to bring in one of our experts, Brother John Ruffin, and I want to ask him a question, and then, you know, whatever he wants to give us on this topic. And once again, Professor Van Cleave, thank you again for your contribution. As a justice impacted person, Brother John, what has been your personal experience with the negative effects of this law, and how did that make you feel during that experience? And also, if you can, because you have a unique perspective on this, you even asked for an itemized bill, which was ingenious, brother. And talk to us about how that worked out and those things didn't match up, brother.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to get a few things in while I have the professor here and Nolan as well, because she actually did a great segue into some of the things that I wanted to discuss. So the thing that you're talking about is the budgeting chief. And I was incarcerated, so I want to make sure everybody understands. I was incarcerated when they sued me. Now, here's something that you, Brother Darrell, Fred, Brother Vaughn would be familiar with, and his sister. Well, DOC got rid of law libraries. You guys remember that, and you
Say
remember
it again, brother, so they can hear you.
They removed the law libraries out of the prison system. So here I am representing myself. I had no law library, and they changed something else that's real significant that we need to know, and they changed the indigent policy of when an inmate is indigent. So here it is. They put a lien on my money. And I'm representing myself. I need the law library. I need to make legal copies. So I have to have my family send me money so that I may have legal copies made. I may have legal books forward to me because there's no law library. It's only resource centers now. So this is something that those who are in the law field need to look at, is that Connecticut DOC no longer have law libraries. Some inmates cannot find representation, therefore are forced to represent themselves. Myself, I was just up for the challenge, and the indigent policy is so outrageous that it's something like you have to have $5 or less for like 90 days.
Say that again, brother.
I could be incorrect on it because it's been a while since I've been in, but the indigent policy was you have to have $5 or less for like 90 days. So that is about as poor as you can be in prison, to be indigent in prison. So they would have you purchase toilet paper. They would have you purchase soaps. They would have you purchase T-shirts and underwears, where they used to give these things out to us. You need new T-shirts, you get new T-shirts, new underwears. But nowadays you have to be indigent. If you need new sneakers, you have to fit the indigent policy. So how do you survive even in prison for 90 days or for $5 or less? So these are significant things that people need to know about some of the things that DOC has done. So here I am fighting DOC trained attorney generals. And if I recall correctly, I had two different attorney generals in my case, and I'm fighting them with no legal training, no law library. And I had my Black Law Dictionary and I had a few law books. So I was somewhat prepared, but everyone is not in the position that I was in. So I asked them for the budgeting chief, and I want everybody to pay attention because this is very important.
Very important.
When I got the budgeting chief, I wonder why they wanted to fight me so hard on this. They didn't want this in my hand. I mean, they filed every motion possible. I mean, the judge ruled, and they was like, "Well, Your Honor, if I could be heard again, yeah," and I was like, you know, it's over with. And when they sent it to me, I had captains, I had counselors come to my office, to my cell and say, "Can you come to my office?" Hey, they say, hey man, I hear you got this paperwork. The Attorney General want to know how you want to negotiate for them to get that paperwork you have. Hey, bro, I'm from the streets, so you know I made copies, right? And I got the things that I needed to get out of there. So one of the things that I learned was that the state of Connecticut owed this town of Enfield for water, and I believe it was electricity, and it was a couple other things that they owed the town for. So I sat in prison. I watched enough Judge Maryland, Judge Joe Brown, Judge Judy, enough to hear the same argument that, and I'm going to make this argument clear for those who may not be as legal savvy.
Make it plain, brother.
If Dayeed rents apartment from Brother Fred and he subleased to me, I don't pay Dayeed and Dayeed is not paying Fred. Dayeed cannot collect on his debt from me because there's no injury there. Yes, I owe Dayeed legally, but now Dayeed has to show where he's injured.
Go ahead, brother.
So
Say it
Brother
again.
Fred, unless he collects from Dayeed, Dayeed cannot collect from me. So it's the same argument that I made against DOC, that DOC owes the state of Enfield. And then I found out it owed the city of Cheshire and Somers and places. So if they haven't received the injury, how can they collect on a debt when there's no injury there? And for the legal minds that's on this call, they could best speak to this matter. So this is the one thing that I want everybody to understand as you go forward with this matter, that you need to investigate what is the indigency policy, what is the is DOC themselves not paying their bills, and I have a few other notes. And one thing I found out also, why this budgeting chief is so important for us to get our hands on now, is because I learned that, first of all, they said commissary was a self-existent entity. There's no money need to be poured into commissary. But then I began to look at the recreational and other entities inside DOC. They get all them, from the kitchen to the recreation department, they get a budget. And most of the time, they do not buy new basketballs, baseballs, and new rims. And so the money they save DOC, they get a kickback. They get a bonus. So that money is not being spent on inmates. That money is actually going to the supervisors in these departments. So we need to get hold of this budgeting chief, and I guess through FOI, and once you get that in your hands, you'll begin to see where DOC is putting the money. These kitchen supervisors are getting bonuses because they're not feeding the inmates. Now let's get down to something else, and I'm gonna shut up in a minute because I got so much to say. From the library, from the indigency policy to the bonus kickback. But I want to talk to the attorneys because, matter of fact, before I go there, I also want to talk about, they want to say, and attorney, Professor Van Cleave laid it out perfectly about the per diem. Here's the problem. You know, because they can never itemize how much water and stuff that I used or whatever. But here's another thing that I learned through the budgeting chief. Each facility in the state of Connecticut costs a little different than the next. So Osborne, and let's say right here, Gardner, they have mental health units in there. So therefore, based on the fact that there's a special need at that facility, it costs more for, let's say, Darryl McGraw to be housed at Osborne, although he has no mental health need. It was DOC who sent him to that facility, although he don't need to be there. And by him being there, the cost of his incarceration rises.
Mm.
You follow what I'm saying? So Osborne has a unit for sexual abuse. People that's in there for sexual charges. Well, I never commit a crime against women or children or anybody else in that manner. Why am I being charged for someone else's medical needs? For alcohol and drug abuse, they have special units. And if you're housed at that facility, you're paying for someone's cost of rehabilitation.
That's not your cause.
That's not my cost, not my
That's
need.
right, brother.
So my need may be that I just need to do a couple programs and get out of prison, which brings me back to what Brother Vaughn was talking about. And one thing he needs to understand, he might have been in prison 18 months, that bid, but they can go back and add from previous bids. And that's the problem with this, because they could go back to, I forget what year, maybe 85 or something, and they could bring up that bid and add it with the other bid to determine your cost of incarceration. So everyone needs to know that as well. Oh my goodness, I lost. Oh, and I'm gonna close on this note. For the professors that's on this this call, there's something to be said about when a person is, because this is really punishment. This is double jeopardy. There's no getting around it. And there's no getting around this. This is hands down punishment. So I asked them, can I write a book and make money? Because you know that you can't make money off of your crime. Well, how you going to charge me and not allow me to have an income from an outside source? So if I could write books, and if I could write movies about my crime and my life to make money, how can you handcuff me and then tell me you're going to charge me for the cost of my incarceration, but yet I'm not allowed to make money? But here's another thing. As we
I think some people miss that point. That's very relevant. And give it back to us again, brother, because I don't think they caught that what you're saying is, but they're making money off of your crime. Go ahead, say it again.
Yes, sir. So how is it that you prevent me, you handcuff me from making money off of my crime, which I understand, but then you turn around and charge me for the cost of incarceration, but you won't allow me to make a living while I'm in there?
And none of that money is going to the victim's advocate. Am I correct?
None of that's going to the victim advocate.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
To the best of my knowledge. And when we're going before a court, since this is punishment, this should be part of your plea agreement. Or when you get ready to make your plea, you need to assess whether or not, your lawyer, part of your plea agreement should be, well, that they offer you 10 years. And if you take the 10 years, it's possible they may come after you. I did the chopping of the numbers. You may owe the state $5,000. But if you go to trial and lose trial and get 60 years, you may be on the hook for $150,000. So all this should be part of the process of plea agreement, because now it has to play a role in the way that you choose whether or not you go to trial or not.
Absolutely.
Because now if I go to trial,
don't go too deep into that, because Attorney Crossland going to address that in particular, brother. But
okay, so I'm done with that. And the last piece, and I'm finally done, is that I have a culinary degree. So how is it that you're charging people for the cost of incarceration and you're paying them slave wages, right? Pay me according to my skill level. There are people that's in there that's electricians by trade, right? But you're paying them $18 every 2 weeks, $21 every 2 weeks. But then you turn around and charge them for the cost of incarceration. Pay me according to my skill set if you're going to charge me for the cost of incarceration. And I yield my time. I apologize for being long-winded, but
No, we
this
needed
is a
all
matter
that.
that's so dear to me, and it's very important, and I'm glad y'all tackling it. I feel like Vaughn Live, I'm amped up now.
Yo,
Yes,
brother,
sir.
you wasn't long-winded. It was right on time and much needed.
That's right.
Yeah, I just wanna quote something from Undersecretary Mike Lawler. This is what he said when he knew this law was going into effect.
Give it to us, brother.
He said, what we do know, if former inmates have a job, they keep a job. They are less likely to commit crimes. This is what Lawler said. What we don't want is to disincentivize someone from getting a job, or even worse, have them quit a job because of the cost of incarceration and what it might do. So it's not like these people didn't know or doing research to understand what it might do to someone coming home. This is straight from Mike Lawler, man. This ain't coming from somebody else. And he was the undersecretary at that time. So as we move forward, we need to get him in this conversation, since he understood and knew from the start, as well as Richard Blumenthal, who was the AG at that time. Richard Blumenthal was the AG, and we see him now in the Congress, and he's talking about disenfranchisement of people in different parts of poverty and where they come from. We need to get him back in this conversation to undo some of the stuff as far as what they've done in Connecticut, as far as reform is concerned, and take that rope or that noose from around our necks. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. I believe you got a question for Professor Sarah Russell. Thank you again.
I sure do. And Sarah, she's been with us from the onset. You know, I remember a couple conferences myself and Dai was at, and we brought this up. And I always want to thank her, because on the side, she came up to me and she said something to me about that. And I didn't hear from her for about 6 months or so. And then she hit me up with an email and said, Fred, I want to start that conversation with you again on the cost of incarceration. And we've been on that train ever since. So without further ado, Sarah, the question we have for you is, based on your research on the law of Connecticut on the cost of incarceration, what has the research revealed, and why do you feel the law has negatively impacted people who have been formerly incarcerated?
Well, thanks for the question, and again for including me today. So I'll start by saying I benefited from a lot of student research on this issue. So Sarah Markham and Ashley Servin worked on research on this really starting a few years back, as well as the collateral consequences subcommittee of the Sentencing Commission has explored and discussed this issue as well. So thanks to members of that group as well for their interest in exploring this. So as you've heard, under current Connecticut law, the Connecticut Department of Correction assesses incarcerated people for their costs of their incarceration. And the state then has a claim against formerly incarcerated people for this cost. And then there are these liens that attach to proceeds both from lawsuits and also from inheritances that last for 20 years after release from incarceration. And so these liens really perpetuate intergenerational poverty, prevent people from accumulating wealth. And there's a huge disparate impact on people of color in Connecticut. So to turn first to the issue of lawsuits. So essentially, if someone's injured and sues, and this could be from a motor vehicle accident, it could be from an injury within a correctional facility, any range of different types of injuries that occur both in and out of prison. money that's recovered, whether it's through a settlement or through a trial, is subject to this lien. And the lawyer involved is required to notify the state about in instances where a client is subject to this lien, and ensure that the money is paid from the proceeds. With respect to inheritances, it works in multiple directions in a way that's harmful to formerly incarcerated people. So first, if you were formerly incarcerated and then you yourself are receiving an inheritance, whether it's from a parent or other family member, what have you, who passes away, that money that would be coming to you is subject to that lien, so that you're able to receive only a portion of it. And there's a process through the probate court where the probate court's required to notify the state and otherwise with respect to those liens. Similarly, if someone themselves is formerly incarcerated and then themselves pass away and are trying to pass on wealth to their children and to the next generation, that money as well is subject to takings by the
Sarah, could you say that part again? Because that's important. Innocent children are going to be held accountable for. Go ahead.
Exactly. So these are children who have already suffered from their parent being taken away and incarcerated, and so they've grown up with that disadvantage already, and that lack of resources from a parent who's unable to earn while they're incarcerated. And then when that person comes out, their ability to accumulate wealth to then pass on to their children is reduced by this lien for up to 20 years. So it's both the ability of people to themselves receive inheritances from parents and help them get back on their feet after incarceration. Whether it's through a lawsuit or through inheritance, but then also, their ability and frankly incentives to accumulate that wealth to then pass along. And so this law has been in place in some form in Connecticut since 1995. It was first enacted by the legislature. The original statute required the Department of Correction to adopt regulations concerning the assessment of incarcerated people for the cost of incarceration, without a lot of direction beyond that requirement to regulate in this area. So it was really legislation in 2001 that created these costs of incarceration liens regarding the inheritances and the lawsuit proceeds that's had the biggest impact, and had that 50% number, that up to 50% could be taken. In the state currently, in the last year we have data from, which is 2018 to 19, was taking $6 million a year through this cost of incarceration activity. And that's been somewhere between sort of 5 and 6 million for the past number of years. We saw some change in 2004. The state, the legislation said that a lawsuit could be brought in Superior Court against formerly or incarcerated people for the cost of incarceration. So it gave a new method for seeking these funds outside of the lien process, but also put in place at that time the 20-year limitation, which hadn't been in place before. So that's really where the legislation left off, all the way back in 2004 in terms of any changes. And other than that, it's remained in place and has operated. So I think turning just briefly to the two issues, both the lawsuits and inheritances. Regarding the lawsuits, these aren't instances where someone's gotten some kind of windfall. These are instances where someone's been injured and harmed and is
excellent point.
For that harm, and is entitled to the compensation, whether it's via settlement or a jury award. And so But I think the existence of this lien creates a disincentive for people who have been harmed to even seek redress through the courts for that harm, and also for attorneys to take the cases of people who are subject to these liens because the recovery is that much less. And these liens operate even in the context of cases where people have been harmed within a prison at the hands of state officials in the prison setting. There was a recent case involving a incarcerated person who won a jury verdict involving punitive damages at trial. And there were some limits that a court, first the district court in Hartford, and now the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, has put on the operation of the lien in that context. But it's hard to know how far that case will go. But I do think that case provides an opportunity for the legislature to really rethink how this lien operates, not only in the context of that was a case involving someone who's was assaulted in a prison setting, but more broadly in terms of lawsuits outside of the correctional setting. But the point is, there are definite repercussions for people who are seeking fair compensation for harms that they've suffered through this lawsuit lien provision. And then I think we've talked some already about the inheritance provision, just in terms of the way it really perpetuates poverty in an intergenerational way, and means that the impact of decisions that were made decades ago to incarcerate large numbers of people in our state are going to have, even as we may reform some practices around incarceration in our state and lower the numbers of people incarcerated, the repercussions of decisions made many years ago will continue to have impact because of just the large swaths of our state that have experienced incarceration because of the era of mass incarceration. So I just want to stress that point, that while the state may be moving in a more positive direction on this front, the fact that this statute remains in place means that those repercussions from decisions made many years ago will continue to operate, and really are harming, in particular, communities of color, which have been disproportionately impacted here, and gets at really the core problem, which is intergenerational poverty and the inability to dig out of it for people who are spending large amounts of their earning years incarcerated, and thinking about the children of those people as well. So I think that's sort of the need to reform, I guess, that I see in with respect particularly to the inheritance piece as well. And I'll finally just echo, I think we're maybe turning to this soon, but the issue of sort of informed decision-making when people plead guilty in court and not knowing necessarily about the existence of this statute. I think that was a great point that was raised by Mr. Ruffin.
Absolutely. Sarah,
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your contribution to this. As always, you've been in this struggle with us. So we're kind of running on time. We want to get to the questions and answers, but we have two more direct questions, one for our sister Ayishea and one for Attorney Crossland. I'm hoping we get time for a couple of questions. I appreciate, me and Brother Fred appreciates everybody's patience with this issue because of all the information that's involved with it. It could be kind of long, but it's very, very relevant, very important. Ayishea, we have a direct question for you. Also as a justice impacted person, what has been your personal experience with the negative effects of this law? And we really want to know, like, how did it, if you like to be honest with us, is how did this make you feel, so you could capture for everybody who doesn't have this experience, like a few of us, on how this really makes you feel, because we don't need their sympathy, but we need their empathy. So sister, the floor is yours, and whatever you feel you need to talk about concerning this issue.
There's 1,000 issues when dealing with, reintegrating, coming back from incarceration, period. So,
Good point.
so it affects my life in a major way. Yes, I did a crime. I paid for that crime, but to what extent do I have to keep paying? It's like it's like a lifetime. It's like a lifetime affair. That's how I
Say
feel.
it again. It's a what?
It's a lifetime affair. It's like it keeps resurfacing. Every time I think, it's always something. Example, when I got hired for DCF, yes, I know I'm parted, but when I had to go there, when they called me and said, you gotta come do your fingerprints, I had an anxiety attack. Why is it? It's still haunting me. Everything like it's just a never ending thing. It's just different issues come up at different times. It's just always something. You know, even with it's different. So when it comes from like my clients, example. So one of the families that I have one of the cases now is a DV case, and dad is in the street, so he looked me up. Now, how is he able to go on Google and find out about my case when I'm pardoned? Why is that even still, why is that still surfacing when you Google my name? So when he asked me a definitive question, and he FaceTimed me, I'm like, I'm stuck, because I said, that's not why I'm calling you. Because how do you respond to that when somebody's just blatantly asking you things? It's just always coming up. It's always. And I just wanted to go away. Like, how like, honestly, like, how long do I have to pay? Like, I did that 8 years. I've been home 10 years. And it's just every day. It's just never ending.
Excellent point. Anything, I mean, in your situation was, if you don't mind sharing that information with us, someone passed away in your family or you had a lawsuit?
So no, so last year, I had a few accidents back to back. Like I just had the worst luck last year. So I got hit, I got rear-ended, I got physically hit by a vehicle, thrown in the air. Like they touched all three. So I had 3 back to back in 1 year. So when I had those 3, the same lawyer handled those lawsuits. That's what I'm saying. The first one, they didn't touch. No one did anything. Like, he didn't even know. But the second one, that's why when he called me, the first thing he said was, Ayishea, you've been incarcerated. And that's why I was thrown off, because I've known him for a long time. Like, I've been dealing with him since I've been home for 10 years. And, you know, that's never come up. That's not something that you talk to an attorney of, not like for, you know, a lawsuit. It's just who wants to be reminded. It's just like going for your party. You go for the party, you're back in the courtroom. It's just re-traumatizing. You're always re-traumatizing yourself with different situations in your life. So you did your time, you come home, and you can't be normal like everyone else. You can't. You have a number, and even though I'm pardoned and that number is supposed to be obsolete, it's not, because I had a staff member that's a counselor at the prison. When I got hired at DCF, I said, could you just do a check, RT-60? Because I worked in property when I was incarcerated. So I said, could you do one of those RT things in the system to see if my name come up? And when she called me back, she said, Ayishea, that's crazy. She said, it does. You can tell that you've been here. It's just no information in here. But that number is still my number. I don't want it.
Say it again.
I don't want it.
Thank you, sister. We really appreciate your contribution. And I wanted people to feel how this sister feels, how a lot of us feel. And like she said, she's wondering, she did her time, she discharged and got a pardon, and she's wondering every day, when is this experience going to be over? I thank you so much for that, sister.
Ayishea, I just want to say something in reference to your name, they being able to find your name that easily. There was a case in New York, and I'm going to look it up, that once a person got a full pardon, they sued the state of New York for them being able to find their name in the system. Because once you got that full pardon, they're not supposed to find your name anymore. I'm going to try to look up that case for you to get your name out of whatever it is that they won't have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Fred. And I want to try to get to the questions, so I'm just going to, for the sake of time, our good friend, Attorney Crossland, is not here, but the brother kept his word. He's on trial. He's on now. He's trying to get in. But I have the video, and the question for him was, as a practicing trial attorney, Attorney Crossland, what is your expert opinion on the application of this law to those persons who were convicted prior, say that again, who were convicted prior to the enactment of this cost of incarceration law in terms of ex post facto and the legal definition of retroactivity? And this is what he sent me. I haven't seen it yet, but the brother's a great attorney and I appreciate him. Tell me if you can see it and hear it.
Good morning, Brother McKnight, Brother Hodges, and all the distinguished guests on the panel. Thank you for allowing me to contribute. My name is Darnell Cross, and I'm a practicing attorney here in Stamford, Connecticut, also practice throughout the state of New York. The question that's before the panel today is very, very important. We have a notion that if you do the crime, you do the time. And the idea of rehabilitation also encompasses financial rehabilitation. So the question before the panel today is, if you are incarcerated and you're released and you left the house or you left some monies from a family member, or you have a car accident, you were able to come into a couple dollars for compensation, should the government or the state be allowed to capture that? Well, the answer from a moral standpoint, I think, is no. And when you look at car accidents, for instance, you don't pay taxes on the compensation because the law says that once you're injured, you can never be made whole again, no matter how much money you get. So therefore, you can only pay taxes on the profits that you make. So that's, if you're in an accident and you're broken, if you're made better than you were before, then that space from where you were to the betterment is the profit. And the law finds that if you're hurt and you're injured, you can never be better than you were before, no matter how much money you get. So that's untaxed. By way of example or comparison, if you're incarcerated and you do your time and you're released, then the question becomes, if you're in a car accident, how should they take that money, capture the money, and apply it to the time you spent in jail? Well, we think that that's wrong. But from a legal standpoint, the question before me is whether, in fact, these laws can be applied to individuals who were incarcerated prior to their enactment. And I will just start off by talking about retroactivity. The Constitution protects the application of retroactivity. Black's Law Dictionary defines retroactivity as a law that looks backwards or contemplates the past. A law that affects or has some type of basis or facts that affect things that happened before it was put in place. When they look at retroactivity, the question becomes whether retroactive punishment is permitted. And the Constitution clearly states that retroactivity cannot be applied in a penal sense to punish people backwards. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3 of the Constitution provides that no ex post facto law shall be passed. And the phrase retroactivity, the phrase ex post facto is a Latin term that means after the fact. So if a person was incarcerated prior to the enactment of the law, there should be no retroactivity that can affect them. But here's the rub. The law speaks about it being from a penal standpoint. So the question is whether, in fact, capturing an individual's monies or inheritance or compensation from, say, a car accident is a penal thing. And while one may say that it isn't because it's not putting them back in jail, if it's going to hamper their ability to move forward in life and progress in life, I think it's definitely a punishment. And I think it's something that the legislature should be looking at changing. as we move forward. There's a bunch of case law out there on this matter. Burgess versus Salmon, 97 U.S. 381 is a case to look at. And I'll just leave you by saying that there's a lot of retroactivity in terms of civil litigation that's coming on the way. And they're taking it out of the...
So that's all I was able to get as he sent the video. I appreciate what he sent, but we also had a discussion where he's talked about what Mr. Ruffin had alluded to, that when you plead guilty, if you plead under the Alfred Doctrine, that's a whole nother story. We ain't got time for that. But when you plead guilty under the Alfred Doctrine, in order for them to accept your plea at the plea canvassing hearing, it has to be voluntarily and intelligently made, based on the advice that you get from your attorney. Wait a minute. There go the brother right there. He just checked in. We just played the video. Talk to us about the relevancy of this and how it relates to when people plead guilty, not knowing the unforeseen circumstances. Thank you for coming.
Well, good afternoon. Definitely, we're definitely in a new age, new era with this virtual reality. As I said, I'm on trial now. We just took a break, so I just wanted to dial in. So sorry for my being late.
No, we appreciate you.
But yeah, so the reality is obviously when you plead guilty and you're incarcerated or you accept a sentence, you know, the idea is that through that rehabilitation process, you're going to be able to get out, stand on your own 2 feet, and move forward. But if the government or the state is still in your pockets and asking you to pay back for rent on a lease that you didn't sign, it's hard for you to move forward. So basically the law, as I'm seeing it, it looks at retroactivity when they apply a new law to a sentence that happened way before. They're saying it's not legitimate if it has a penal effect, if it has a punishing effect. But now the question is whether, in fact, even though it has a civil impact on you, because money is not criminal per se, it's not penal per se, but it's still debilitating because they're taking away compensation or inheritances that people have been left. And I think that that's not the direction that we should be going in. So again, if there's any questions for me, I mean, you know, it's a topic that we should continue to build on. And I hope the video was clear from this morning.
Thank you so much. We open for questions, Brother Dow. Any questions that someone wants to ask while we have Darnell's presence here before he goes back into court? Any questions for any of our panel members?
There were a couple of comments in the chat box, as well as people are welcome to raise their virtual hand. But one that was interesting to me is that I think it's AG, or I'm not really sure how. If you want to unmute yourself, you can. But my understanding is if you receive a full pardon, you wouldn't be responsible for the payback any of your incarceration costs. Has your attorney contacted the DSS worker on your case or what have you? So that was a question in reference to like it's a great question. And I want to bring Bill and Andrew in at the end of this channel just to hear, you know, because they've been doing this work. But my question is like for anybody, Attorney Crossland, Sarah, have you or Nolan or anybody on the panel about that? If you receive a full pardon, that means full pardon means you're done. Why would there be any costs associated with that? And if I got a pardon, I'll be looking to be reimbursed. We're gonna just keep moving. Anybody want to answer that question in reference to the pardon, and should there be fees tied to it? If you got a full pardon, why is there a cost of incarceration? And this is something I want to thank the whole panel for saying this, because this is something that I know Daid has been super passionate about since we've been doing this work. But the thing is that this is swept under the rug. There's a lot this is a lot of money. We're not talking about a couple of dollars. We're talking about a lot of money. There's a line item budget about it, and it's directly related to slavery. Like, come on, man. Let's be
Say
clear.
that again.
And
Say that
who really benefits from it, and how wealth is generated in this country. When people die, people leave them houses and inheritance. Well, you're keeping people, especially of color, since we make the majority of the people incarcerated, away from any type of wealth.
And Daryl, what we would like to do, and I think Tajamir has his hand up, what we would like to do is, like, if Fred have been affected by it, and so has John Ruffin, but we were sentenced in the 80s. I was sentenced in the 80s, and I was impacted by it myself. And what I would like to do is, because I was sentenced before this law came out, we are looking for an attorney who's willing to file a class action suit to make a declaratory judgment and also recoup what we lost from the state unjustly. And if any attorney is willing to take on this case, we can get you 7 people off the rip right now, because I think the state has really made a grave mistake and they've left themselves open to litigation. I suggest that maybe we move in the direction of changing it legislatively, so maybe they don't have to go that way. But it's up to them. But I know one thing: I don't like nobody taking nothing from me. And before it's over, we're gonna find a way to have everything recouped.
Right, and you know what's interesting is those of us that live in these impacted communities, right? Not a dime came back to the community.
Not
Like,
a nickel.
not a dime came back to the hood. Like, what happened to that? So, like, you're gonna take some money, at least put some hoops up, build some playgrounds. Can we get some lunches or something? Nothing, zero. So that money goes right back into the general coffer, and the same money that's taken from you only enhances the system that perpetuates all this stuff anyway. Anybody else?
Or it hasn't went back to reinvestment into reentry at any place.
Exactly.
They took $6 million from cost of incarceration. Seemed like a budget would be set aside for those who were formerly incarcerated and reentry. You can't even get a bus pass for an individual, and you done took $6 million from people who were formerly incarcerated.
Right, we gotta follow the money. We gotta follow the money.
Brother Fed raised an interesting point. We have all these programs trying to help individuals get back on their feet and re-enter, as the name states. So, is my mic up? Oh, yeah. So we're trying to effort to, supporting people re-entering and getting back on their feet. And so, how are you, in a hypocritical way, taking money from an individual at the same time? So that's something that has to be dealt with. And also, the point was raised about the pardon. So let's make a distinction. It's one thing to be pardoned, and there's another thing to apply for an expungement of your record. If you're pardoned, then it's saying that we forgive you. You didn't do this, and you shouldn't have to pay anything back if you're pardoned, and they should probably pay you back,
Right.
as opposed to if you just had a record expunged. So I think that again, this work is extremely important work. As the brother said, this is connected to slavery, is connected to disenfranchisement, and we have to look at it like that. There's so many other groups who are able to benefit from inheritances and benefit from the generations before them. So we get put in this format that we're incarcerated, we have records, and we can't move forward. And then on top of that, they're saying, I want some money back. And so, we really got to look into this.
Absolutely. Brother Darrell, I don't want to forget, Tajamir had his hand up. Thank you, Darnell. We appreciate that, Attorney Crossland. Tajamir, you had a question, brother?
Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings.
Alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, my situation, I'll be brief, is that I was incarcerated or sentenced in the 80s, and before this law was enacted. And so during my freedom, after I've gotten out, I filed several lawsuits. I filed lawsuits in the prison, as a matter of fact, and received thousands of dollars for it. And they weren't, the law wasn't in it at that point. Since I've been out, I've filed lawsuits, received thousands of dollars. And then the state comptroller was asking my lawyer if I have any liens on me. I had one with the Department of Labor, and then it was an issue of being incarcerated. And my point was, when I committed a crime, they remanded me to the state of Connecticut, Department of Corrections, to pay a debt, my debt to society. This debt was paid. So if this debt is paid, what else do I owe? You know, this is one of the things that I was trying to explain to these people. They didn't have a way at my money at that point. I don't know whether it was because I was sentenced prior to law being enacted, but while I was in prison, we filed a lawsuit for wrongful incarceration. I think it was $2,856 a day that they would have to pay you for wrongfully incarcerating you. So I'm saying that if there's a dollar amount to the amount of days that I can be wrongfully incarcerated, then I'm adding that to the amount of days that I've been incarcerated all that time. I came up with a dollar figure for like, what, 6,000 some odd days incarceration. I forgot what it was. So now how could they, if I paid my debt to society, right, and this is the dollar amount that it costs out of my life, there is no, like you said, being in an accident, being made whole, there's no way 1 day of incarceration you can get back from that. There's no way you can get it back. You'll never be made whole from the torment and traumatic experience of being incarcerated. So what type of argument along those lines can be made to try and break this law, reverse this law as you would have it on the debt to society argument? Over.
Thank you, brother. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. That was an excellent question. We have to close out. But I think that's what we're in the process now of coming together and continue to figure out a solution to this. This is something that must be changed. In closing, we just want to say that, you know, in order for these things to be changed, we have to continue to do the work that we're doing and push the agenda. And that's why it's important for people who were formerly incarcerated to be involved in the steering and the decision-making process of criminal justice reform organizations and reentry organizations, so that our experience, our being informed about our own situation is really the solution. So I think we have to continue to move in that direction. And Fred said, we're looking for any attorney that's willing to take on a class action lawsuit for those who were sentenced prior to the law coming out that were affected by it. We're ready to do that. We're dead serious, and we appreciate all of your time and your patience with this panel. Thank every panel member from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you. Thank you, and have an excellent afternoon.
Brother,
close remarks, Brother Fred.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody who stayed on, who listened to one of the most important issues, I think, of our time for those who were formerly incarcerated. And I just want to say, this is not just a moment, this is a movement for all of us. Let's stay connected, let's stay vigilant, and we ain't going to give up, man. You know, it's about this war, that's all. Thank you very much.
Brother Fred, can I just add that just to answer the call, I'm willing to head up the campaign to put together an exploratory committee of attorneys to explore the idea, because a lot of lawyers say, well, you know, I'm not going to be retained if I don't know the area, but why don't we put together an exploratory committee? I can get 4 or 5 lawyers together, brief the topic, host the topic, and then we'll go from there. You know, there's a lot of good brothers across the country. Billy Murphy in Baltimore, and you know, is one. And so let me put together an exploratory committee of lawyers and advocates, and then we go from there.
Thank you.
Man, appreciate you, Darrell.
This is the way it works. This is the way it works. This is the way it works, people. Thank you for everybody, Brother Ruffin. And then I'm going to pitch to Bill Dyson, but this was a great panel. This was what we wanted. We've been wanting this, and this is just the start. This is foundation.
I need my song,
work.
I need my song, Darrell.
I got you, baby. I got you. DJ, you better be queuing that up. Brother Ruffin, and then I'm going to go to Bill Dyson. Let's get it.
Love you. Love y'all, man.